Hey everybody, what's up? My name's Adam and welcome to Jamsville. So that song I just played is a very, very famous song by a very, very famous band. Drop a comment down below if you know what song it is. That song uses a lot of minor triads that are really, really cool and are what constructed that whole entire riff. So in today's video, I'm going to show you the right way to learn minor triads all over the guitar neck so you can master them and be able to come up with your own cool little chordal riffs like that in your songs, or be able to use them to play other people's songs and make them into your own unique version. So without further ado, let's get started right now. So it's going to be really helpful if you watch my last video, how to learn major triads the right way, because you're going to see that the minor triads are very, very similar to the major triads, except there's one key difference, which is that one of the notes is different. So first we need to learn how to construct a minor triad. And before you can construct a minor triad, you need to know how to construct a major triad. And if you remember from that video, a major triad is constructed using a root, a major third, and a perfect fifth interval. That's it, 3 notes: root, major third, perfect fifth. The minor triad is super easy. There's only one difference, which is the third. The whole key is in the third. So in a minor triad, we have a root, minor third, and a perfect fifth. And a minor third just means we take our major third interval and we lower it by half step. Or in this case on the guitar, we move it down 1 fret. So our first major triad that we started with in the major triad video looked like this. It had the notes C, E, and G, and this was a C major triad. But for our minor triad, we're going to change the E, which is the major third, into an E flat. And again, I did this by simply moving this E note down 1 fret. And now we have our C minor triad. Okay, now the next step is we need to invert this chord so that we can start figuring out all the different ways to play it. So inversion just simply means we're going to rearrange the notes a little bit. So we had C, E flat, and G in that order from bottom to top, but now we're going to play some different versions where E flat is the bottom note or G is the bottom note. And the bottom note, again, is what you need to pay attention to in inversion. So just to review inversions, we have root position when the root is on the bottom. We have first inversion when the third of the chord is on the bottom. Doesn't matter if it's a major third or a minor third. Any chord with a third on the bottom is a first inversion. And then we have second inversion, which has the fifth on the bottom. So we have this root position, and what we're going to do is we're going to raise this C, which is the root, up an octave. And now we're going to leave the E flat and the G exactly where they were, and we're going to have this C minor first inversion triad. As you can hear, it sounds much, much, much different than the root position. Good, so that's already we have 2 different versions of C minor that we can play anywhere on the fretboard. Now we're going to invert it again to get our last inversion. Now there's going to be more repetitions of these inversions, but there's only 3 total inversions. So we're going to raise the bottom note, E flat, up an octave. And now we're going to have this C minor second inversion triad. Now actually, one thing I like to point out along the way is the similarities between these shapes and other chords that you probably know already that you learned early on in your guitar journey. So this C minor triad is actually exactly the same shape as the A minor open chord that everyone learns in the beginning of playing guitar. Same exact shape, but we don't strum 5 strings. We just strum the 3 strings that we have our fingers on. Okay, so now we got our second inversion, which has the fifth on the bottom, and finally we're going to raise that G, which is on the bottom, up an octave. And now we have another C minor root position, but this time it's in a higher octave. It sounds a bit different than this lower one. So here's the bottom root position, and here's the top root position. Okay, cool. Let's review all of the different C minor triads in that position that we have. Cool, now you already have 4 different versions of that C minor triad you can already use. And we're just scratching the surface because we're gonna learn them all over the fretboard. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind, I'm gonna repeat this, you need to remember where the root is in each of those shapes. So in the first shape, the root is on the bottom with the pinky. And the next shape, the root is actually the top note on the 3rd string. And the next shape, it's the same string, the 3rd string, but it's actually in the middle of the shape. And then in the top shape, the root is the bottom again. You really want to know where all the chord tones are in each of those shapes, but especially at first, just make sure you really understand where the roots of each of those chords are, because the root is going to be the key for you being able to move those shapes around the fretboard and play any other chord like B minor or F sharp minor or E minor with these exact same identical shapes that we already learned. Okay, cool. So we covered that position. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to invert a little bit differently. We're going to invert up the same string set. So we're going to keep this chord on the exact same set of strings, the 6th, 5th, and 4th string, but we're going to move it up to a first inversion from this root position. So the way we're going to do this is we're just going to move each of the notes up to the next chord tone that's available. So what do I mean by that? So the chord is spelled C, E flat, G. So if we have a C on the string, we're going to move that C up to E flat. So this C note here on the 6th string, we're going to move it up to E flat there on the 11th fret of the 6th string. Then we're going to move the E flat that was on the 5th string up to G, which is the next available chord tone. That's on the 10th fret of the 5th string. And then we're going to move the G up to C, which is on the 10th fret of the 4th string. And now we have this C minor first inversion, but in a different spot right here, starting from the 6th string. And if you notice, this is the exact same first inversion shape that started from the 5th string here. If you watch that major triad video, you see that every single time we learn one of these triad shapes, and it's either on the 6th string or the 5th string, starting from there, it's going to be the exact same shape. So that's really, really cool too. You don't just have to move these up and down, but you can actually move some of these shapes to different string sets and they're still the same. Okay, so now let's repeat the inversion process, but across strings and in position. So we have this C minor first inversion. We know it's first inversion because the 3rd E flat is on the bottom. Now we're going to move that E flat up an octave to the 8th fret of the 3rd string, and we're going to get this chord. And this is a C minor second inversion. So now this second inversion actually looks a little bit different than this second inversion we played over here. And that's just because of the tuning of the guitar. So now let's move the 5th up an octave so that we can get another root position chord. So that one also looks a little bit different than this root position chord here. But it actually has the exact same identical pitches and notes. It just has a slightly different shape because it's on a different set of strings. It's on the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string instead of the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st string. Okay, so now we have that root position. We only have one more inversion left in this position. So we're going to move this C up an octave. And we're going to get the easiest chord shape of this entire video, C minor first inversion. It's ridiculously easy, of course, because, well, all the notes are in the same fret. They're all in the 8th fret, and you just use one finger and push them all down. You can get anyone to play this chord. Even someone who picked up the guitar for the first time in their entire life could play this chord. And pay attention also, like I said, to where those roots are. Guess what? The root is on the top string. Whenever you have these first inversion triads, no matter what the quality is, major, minor, you're going to have that root on the first string. So like if I want to play this as a G minor triad, well, I'd find G. Okay, G is here on the first string. And then I play that exact same shape. If I want to play as in E minor triad, I'll find E here and then start the shape from there. Okay, so let's review that whole entire position one more time. Okay, guess what? We're actually 2/3 of the way through this whole entire thing. And you're gonna know all your minor triad shapes all over the guitar fretboard. Pretty freaking cool, right? It's actually not that hard to learn this stuff the right way, but you still need to take a little bit of extra time so you know the actual notes and the chords and know the chord tones, and don't just play through the shapes. Like, yeah, you could find these shapes on some Google image or something like that, but are you really gonna actually understand how they work? Probably not. You need someone to explain to you how each of the chord tones works and why those shapes look like that. So with that being said, let's take our first inversion we started with in this position, and we're going to do the same, inverting up a string set so we can get to our next position. So we're going to take our E flat and we're going to move it up to the next chord tone, which is G. G's here in the 15th fret of the 6th string. Then we're going to take our G and move it up to C. And then we're going to take our C and move it up to E flat, the next chord tone. And boom, we have a C minor second inversion triad all the way over here, pretty high on the fretboard. But if you notice, look, this is the exact same shape as our C minor second inversion over here, starting from the 5th string. Pretty cool, huh? All right, now we got our new position started. Let's start inverting up now and flipping those chord tones over the strings and moving them up an octave. So we're gonna move this G up an octave to the G that's on the 3rd string, 12th fret. And here's our new root position, minor triad, C minor triad. Okay, cool. So that one actually looks very similar to this C minor triad that we started with in the beginning of the video. But that one is actually up an octave from the first one. So we're going to keep going here. We're going to move the C, the root, up an octave to C here on the 2nd string. And finally, we're going to move E flat up an octave to E flat on the 1st string. That was actually one of the shapes that I played in that song in the beginning of the video. I played the same shape over here, but that was actually a D minor triad. So if we look at this C minor triad, the root is on the 2nd string. So if I know the notes on the 2nd string, I can find a D here on the 2nd string and play that same shape with my finger and D. I could also play that shape up an octave, by the way, all the way over here. So let's review that whole entire C minor position one more time. One other thing I want to note is that we can actually play some of those shapes that we just played in this position all the way up here. We can play them down an octave. But in the C major video, we were actually able to go through all the inversions of C major because some of the open strings line up with the C major chord. The C major chord had C, E natural, and G in it, but the C minor chord has C, E flat, and G, so we actually can't play all of the inversions in this position, but we can play a few of them. So we can play that exact same C minor second inversion way down here. Ooh, that's a pretty low sounding chord. Pretty dark and scary sounding. You could definitely find some cool uses for that one. But we can play that, and then we can move this G up an octave to the open G string, actually, so we don't play it with our finger. There's our open G string. And then finally, we can move the C up an octave here to the 1st fret of the 2nd string. And we can play that C minor 1st inversion shape one more time. And that's actually, unfortunately, as far as we can go with keeping all the notes in separate strings, because now the high E string, well, is a high E, and we need an E flat to move it up an octave. So we can't go any further there with the C minor chords specifically. So here's all of those shapes really quickly. So just keep in mind, we have all those C's, E flats, and G's right there too. So you want to try to find all the different places you can play any chord, anything that you're learning. You want to try to find it as many places as you can on the fretboard. And the best way for you to be able to do that is if you actually know really, really well all of the notes on every string on the fretboard, all over the fretboard. And if that's something you're interested in, you want to take your playing to the next level and become completely 100% confident and master the fretboard, then make sure you head on over to jamsville.com. That's going to really, really help you to just get all these chords down. And we talk more about triads, all kinds of different chords, and soloing in that course. Everything we're talking about in this video is just scratching the surface. So make sure you go ahead and check out that on jamsville.com. Okay, guess what? You just learned all of your C minor triads all over the entire fretboard. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to review all of them really quickly to make sure you got them all down and you can visualize them all across the fretboard and not just in one position. Then I'm going to show you some other cool, more fun ways to practice this, because I know that just going up and down these chords is not the most musical thing, it's not the most fun thing, but it's a necessary step for you to just get them in your head. Now I'm going to show you how to review them and start being musical with these chords. But first, let's review all of our C minor triad shapes all over the guitar fretboard. Okay, so now that you know all your C minor triads all the guitar fretboard, let's just practice a little bit moving them into some different keys, because, well, obviously you're not only going to play C minor, right? You're going to be playing A minor, you're going to be playing E minor, you're going to play B minor, you're going to be playing all kinds of different minor chords, and you want to be able to use all of these shapes to be able to have different options to play over those minor chords. So whenever you play an A minor chord, you don't want to have to just play the same old A minor chord every single time. You want to be able to play all the different inversions of A minor. So that you can come up with cooler parts and improvise cooler stuff over those different chords. So the most important thing that you want to pay attention to, I'm going to say it again, because it's worth repeating that many times. You need to get it in your head. You need to pay attention to the root of the chord. Now you also need to pay attention to the third and the fifth, ideally as much as the root, but the root is still the most important part, because the root is going to show you where to place these different triad shapes. So with that being said, let's say that we want to play a B minor chord instead of C minor. This is actually going to be a really, really easy one. Why? Because B minor has a root of B and C minor has a root of C. B and C are always one fret apart from each other. They're a half step apart from each other on the guitar fretboard. So whenever you have a C, if you go back one fret, now you have a B. So by using that logic, we should be able to take any of our C minor triad shapes, move them down one fret, and now all of a sudden we're going to have B minor. So let's start with our first C minor shape. Now we're just going to move it down a fret, and remember we had C, E flat, and G. That's the root third and fifth, the root minor third and fifth. So we're going to move it down a half step, and now we have a B minor chord. And the notes in the B minor are actually going to be B, D, and F sharp. So B is the root, D is the minor third, and F sharp is the fifth. If you had a B major chord, D sharp would be the major third. But it's not a major chord, it's a minor chord, so the D sharp gets lowered to D natural. So a B, D, and F sharp. And now you can kind of rely a bit on the shapes that you've already learned, but again, it's still better if you know the actual notes on the fretboard for being able to invert this chord around. But now that we've moved this all down a fret, we can just play the exact same shapes that we played before for C minor. So those are all different versions of B minor. This is a really nice B minor root position chord right here. And check this out. B minor, since A and B are a whole step apart from each other, B is a whole step up from A. Check this out. This B minor second inversion is only 2 frets higher than your A minor second inversion. So this is kind of how you do this moving around the fretboard. You start moving to different keys that are a little bit further and further from the one that you started with, so you can just think of moving them up maybe a fret or 2 frets. So we have all those B minor chords there. And now we can invert those up. So we're going to take B and move it up to D, D and move it up to F sharp, and then F sharp and move it up to B. And boom, now we have our B minor first inversion triad. And again, we could have also just done the same thing. We could have started with our C minor and then just moved it back a half step. And now we can play all those same shapes. And then finally, let's actually try doing that. So let's find our C minor second inversion from before that was all the way up here. And let's just move it back a half step. And now we have B minor second inversion. And you actually can play one of those shapes. You can play that first shape all the way down here, B minor second inversion, super low. So let's review really quick all those B minor triads. We might do one more key. Cool. And even if you're not super familiar with the notes on the fretboard, you can get way more familiar after this video if you pay attention to the notes, which you see on screen, that show you, hey, look, every time I play this chord, this is B, this is D, and this is F sharp. This is B, this is D, and this is F sharp. That's like 6 notes right there on different strings that you could start learning already. Okay, since we're on B, let's actually try another one that's gonna be easy to find. Let's find A minor. So all those B minor shapes that we just found, well, we can move those all back 2 frets and we can have all our A minor shapes. So here's B minor. Let's move that back 2 frets. Boom, now we have A minor, which has A is the root, C is the minor third, and E is the perfect fifth. And now we can invert up with the exact same shapes. It's always the same shapes. It's crazy, right? It's super easy, but again, it can still be confusing if you don't know the notes in the fretboard and you don't know where to place the shapes. The notes tell you where to place the shapes. And we can invert up again like this. And again, one more time. And actually, we can go do a repetition of the original position way up here. So that's a cool thing you're going to notice too with different keys. You can play in different areas because of how the shapes line up with like the open strings. Sometimes you can't play too much around this open string area. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you'll be able to get up a little bit higher on the fretboard too. You could actually go even further than this, but it stops being kind of practical to really squeeze your hands like this and try to play all these notes at the same time, although you still can use those shapes for soloing a little bit more practically. But here we can start our A minor shape with the pinky on the 17th fret of the 6th string. So you just learned all your C minor triads, all your B minor triads, and all your A minor triads all over the guitar fretboard in not a very long time. So what you need to do, again, pay attention to where the roots are and be able to move those roots and therefore the entire shape around the fretboard and be able to figure out what notes are in each of those triads and be able to play all of them all over the entire fretboard. Okay, so last thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna show you some really creative, cool ways that I like to practice things like this so that you can actually start being musical with them immediately instead of just playing them up and down like that, because even though it's important, that's not the most musical thing, it's not the most fun thing to do, just invert these things up and down. So we want to go back to our C minor shapes because you're probably more comfortable with those. We spent a lot of time in those. So we're just going to start in one of these positions and we're going to keep a steady tempo and we're just going to play quarter notes for right now. So we're going to go like 1, 2, 3, 4, this tempo, and we're just going to play quarter notes and we're going to play one note at a time and we're going to actually solo with these arpeggios, because remember, the triads are not just for creating rhythm guitar parts. They are really important for creating rhythm guitar parts, but they're just as equally as important for playing guitar solos. So we're gonna play at this tempo, and I'm just gonna start randomly selecting notes out of this C minor arpeggio shape and kind of going to town with just quarter notes. Remember, keeping the rhythm is actually the most important part. If you hit some wrong notes, that's fine. I may even deliberately play some notes that are outside of the arpeggio and then come back. We'll see. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here I'm trying to like kind of pedal off one note. Now I'm going to switch to eighth notes. Da, 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 da. Now I'm going to include some notes that are not in the arpeggio. Maybe even some wrong notes. So I'm just going like down a fret from the shape. But I can always come right back to that arpeggio note. Ah, there was a little bit of flub there. So as you can see there, what I was trying to do is be creative and more importantly, keep that rhythm. The rhythm is the most important thing. I know that we're focusing on these triads right now, but the rhythm's still more important. It's way more important if I play a note that's outside of the arpeggio, even if it's by accident, and I keep that rhythm steady, I can always come right back and it actually still sounds good. Look, all those notes, some of those were not in key at all. I even played an E natural, which is from a C major chord, not in the chord at all, but it actually still sounded pretty good when it resolved back to the minor triad shape. Right? That actually still sounds pretty good because you're always coming back to that home base of those chord tones in the root, minor, third, and fifth that you know are always going to sound good. So one thing that you also need to do is not just practice in one position, because I'm really big on not getting stuck in playing one position. So what we're going to do is now we're going to take two different positions and try to solo between those two. We're going to expand our minds a little bit. Now, one thing you're going to see that's pretty cool that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find the chord tones that are in the same string and slide between them. So let's see what that sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4. I like that. Pedaling off this one note. Oop. Hit a little open string there. Now some notes that are to the key. Back to the triad. Right, so you see there, now it starts sounding a lot more interesting when you get those slides going actually in between those chord tones, because it gives us more vocal quality. Whenever you can slide up and down a string, that's just going to automatically make you sound like 10 times more pro than being stuck in a position, right? It just does. It sounds completely different because you can never really get those slides in when you're playing in a position. Sure, you can get little slides in like this, but you can't really get those big, nice, wide slides like... That is something that you can't do when you're stuck in one position. Okay, let's try one more. We're going to actually skip over this position here. So we had like that first position we covered in the video, then we had the second, and I was just kind of messing around with those two. Now I'm going to go all the way from this one to this one and just solo with these two. So this is going to take some serious fretboard visualization, and again, this is why knowing the notes helps so much, because I don't really need to think too much about the shapes. I can just think, oh, I know I have an E flat here, a C here, G, E flat, G, or C, and then G. So I know just that's where that shape is. So I don't need to think, oh, what fret is it, the 15th fret? No. I just know that's E flat right there. Boom. So let's see what it sounds like when I solo between those two positions. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the kind of thing, if you throw that in your playing, I mean, you're just going to sound really good. It just makes you look and feel way more free all over the guitar fretboard. You're not stuck in that position. You're getting those nice slides in that vocal quality. You're getting some big interval jumps, which makes your playing less predictable. It just makes you sound a lot better. And if you practice like this, if you practice actually improvising through these triads and try to do that as quickly as possible. Don't spend too much time just running through them like this. I mean, that's important. Do that until you're comfortable, but as soon as you feel kind of comfortable with that, start doing what I just showed you here. Pick a tempo, put on a metronome, put on a drum track, make sure that you're playing with some solid rhythm, and start improvising, mixing those notes up left and right, and then start applying those to some different chord progressions. Try to solo over different chord progressions with only triads. That's going to be a separate video because this is going to make this video way too long if I incorporate it into here. But I'm going to leave you all off with that. So if you want to learn more about the fretboard, master the fretboard with me, I'll show you step by step all the way through being able to master the fretboard, master playing in any key on any chord, then go over to Jamsville.com. And if not, then you want to just keep watching more free videos, check out this video right here. And until next time, listen, learn, and jam.